What's up, Driving Line? My name is Andrew, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about why you should think about buying a 90s diesel pickup truck. So lined up behind me, I have three of the most desirable trucks on the 90s, and these just aren't any old three trucks. These happen to be my trucks. And so I thought I would bring these on as a perfect example of really answering the question of why you should own a 90s diesel truck. Are they loud? Are they old? Yes. Are they insanely cool? Also yes. And so today I want to actually kind of show you guys around, show you guys these trucks, and kind of explain why they are so cool. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar, diesel trucks in the United States really kind of took off in the 90s. In 1989, Dodge Ram and Chrysler stuffed the 12-valve Cummins into their pickup truck, and it was really an experiment. And so they tried to take an industrial engine and basically shove it in the truck and see how it did. And lo and behold, it took off, it exploded. And that truck forever changed diesel pickups in the United States. Now, what came out of that truck was not just the first generation, which is the 89 to 93 Cummins trucks, but in 1994, Dodge said, all right, this worked, and they introduced the second gen. Now, the second gen was basically taking that drivetrain and putting it in a truck that really was as capable as the drivetrain. So this was their saying, all right, the experiment worked, let's take this thing to the next level. And so that's where the second gen comes into play. Now, that ran from 94 to 2002, actually. So that was a long run in that body style. Now, in the meantime, Ford was also experimenting with this, and they introduced the 7.3 Powerstroke. Now, this engine was kind of like a second version of their indirect injection. This was a direct fuel injection. Powerstroke was a 7.3 liter with a turbocharger from the factory. And this really is what took Ford from kind of dabbling in the diesel market to really going full in and saying, this is something we want to take head on. Now, in my personal opinion, these three trucks really are kind of the pinnacle of 90s diesels. These are, one, the most desirable, but also two, I think probably the most fun, the most enjoyable, the most powerful, and the all-around best examples of what a 90s diesel pickup should be. Obviously, everyone has their brand loyalties. I personally prefer the Ram and Ford diesel trucks. But there's a lot of GM fans out there, and those were super cool as well. And I think there's a lot of people that actually agree with me because the market for these trucks has exploded in the past few years. I've seen prices for these trucks literally go up tenfold in the past few years. They have gone from being just basic work rigs that were kind of forgotten about to full-on collector items in just a short time span, and I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. I genuinely think that what we saw happen in the air-cooled Porsche market, what we've seen happen with classic Mustangs, classic Cobras, things like that, I 100% think that diesel pickup trucks are going to become the next muscle cars. They are going to become the next most desirable vehicles out of the American marketplace. And there's good reason for that. That's because these things are insanely capable. They're basically a do-it-all rig. They can do everything from daily driving to hauling a boat to showing up at a nice restaurant. But they can also make insane amounts of power with very little effort, and that is something that is really cool about these things. When you're taking an ultra reliable engine and you're stuffing it into one of these trucks, it's a recipe for making good power with very little expense. Particularly on the 12-valve Cummins, you can literally take a screwdriver and bump yourself up easily 100 horsepower. I mean, it's pretty impressive what you can do with not a lot of effort. If you're willing to bolt on turbo, a couple other things, I mean, you're making 500 horse in these trucks with almost no effort, and that's really, really cool. And I think obviously in America, we love power. These trucks are also kind of coming up on that 25-year-old classic threshold. And so people like me who grew up kind of idolizing these trucks now have the opportunity to own them. And I think that's also exponentially growing their value. There's just something about growing up with a truck, seeing it when you're a young kid, it just sticks in your head forever. And that's exactly what happened to me with these 3 trucks. And since I was a young kid, I've wanted to own these 3 trucks. It's been a goal of mine to make it happen. Of course, I can talk about it, but what really makes these things so cool is actually driving them. Few vehicles on the road sound as good as a straight pipe diesel, but don't take my word for it. Just listen to these things. I've driven a lot of cars in my life, and there are few that get me as excited as driving an old diesel. They're kind of slow, they're kind of loud, but that's part of their charm, and I think that's what makes them so cool. Like, a new vehicle is comfortable, it's quiet, new diesel trucks are extremely powerful, but they'll never have that charm and that visceral, guttural feel that you get from driving one of these old trucks. There's basically nothing that compares to having an industrial grade diesel engine stuffed in front of you with pretty much no sound deadening, and you ripping down the road, shifting your own gears. I mean, there is nothing that compares to the feeling of that. Now, I think the other thing that makes these trucks so cool is the ease of modification. I touched on that a little bit earlier, but I mean, there really are few vehicles that are this easy and this affordable to modify and make impressive amounts of power, but also make them look super cool. Now, the 3 trucks that you see here are all relatively stock, but the second gen and the OBS have just a few tasteful mods that really kind of take them from being like a basic old diesel truck to looking super cool. So there's some really great suspension modifications you can do on these things. My second gen is sitting on a Carly system with 35-inch Nitto ridge grapplers and some Walker Evans classic 90s wheels. The OBS is sitting on a set of 17-inch trail readies with, again, 35-inch ridge grapplers. No lift, actually. That truck is just straight bone stock. They got some exhaust, intake, a couple other things, but it's really amazing what you can do with these trucks with not a lot of effort to have a super, super cool rig that really stands out from the pack. If you're familiar with the 7.3 Powerstroke and the 12-valve Cummins and 24-valve Cummins, you've probably heard about their legendary reliability, and these things are not exaggerated. It is very common to find these trucks with 500,000 miles plus, still running, still working, still hauling trailers, and still functioning just as they should. It's not common to see the truck falling apart around the drivetrain in these things, and that's because these engines are so rock solid reliable. With modern vehicles getting increasingly complicated, way more electronics, emissions controls, all that stuff, these 90s diesels will forever hold their place in automotive history. Now, of course, the interiors aren't quite as comfortable as new trucks. There's a lot less space. Everything's a little bit cheap and plasticky feeling, but I think that's all part of the charm of these things. And I think that's what makes them so cool. Is you probably remember, if you grew up in the 90s like me, riding in one of these trucks with your dad or going out to the farm or doing something like that. And that memory of that sticks with you forever. And I think that's why I fell in love with these trucks so much, but there's a lot of people that feel the same way. There's a lot of cool cars on the market, but in my personal opinion, none are as cool as 90s diesel trucks. And that is reflected in the value of these things. The value in the last 5 years has shot up exponentially, and I truly think in the next 8 to 10 years, these things are going to become full-fledged classics, and the value is going to be appropriate. Will that price myself and a lot of other similar people out of the market? Probably, but it's the unfortunate truth of having probably one of the most desirable US-made vehicles. So I could be wrong, but I think that if you've ever wanted to own a 90s diesel truck, now is probably the time, because in another 5 to 8 years, it is going to be very expensive to do so, especially if you want a clean example. A lot of these trucks got worked hard, they got beat up, they got used as tools, and so finding one that's in good shape is pretty hard to come by these days. So you guys tell me, are 90s diesels worth the hype? Do you think these trucks are actually as cool as I think they are, as a lot of people think they are, or are they just totally overhyped? Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you guys own one of these or if you're thinking about owning one of these. And check out my channel, Just Diesels, where I walk through all these trucks and talk about all that stuff. Thank you so much to Driving Line for hosting me on this video, and hope to see you guys in the near future.